What's going on, motorsports fans? This is Jared here, back with the Bearded Garagistas. Unfortunately, my brother is not with me tonight, but I do have Tyler Duane filling in his place as a co-host tonight. Welcome back to the International Motorsports Podcast without an English accent, and let's get this thing going. All right, welcome back. Thank you, Tyler, for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Hell yeah, it really means a lot that you're stepped in, and I know you are young, but you are well versed in the endurance racing field, and that's what we're going to be talking about today, folks. We are going to go over pretty much a miscellaneous of what news has been going on in racing. We are going to go over the Roar before the 24, and we're going to go over the Rolex 24, all the craziness that happened, and Tyler's pretty much my expert. If I have a question about endurance racing, Tyler's the man I go to. How long have you been, watching and been engulfed in endurance racing?
It really started about 3 years ago. I got back into it. I as a kid, I went to a few races and didn't really understand what was going on, but then a few years ago, I got back into it, and ever since, I've pretty much been obsessed with it, and every day is pretty much endurance racing for me.
Hell yeah. Because I'll tell you how I met Tyler. I follow him on Instagram. He followed me, and then we ended up going to the Sebring 12-hour last year in November. So if you see those photos, those also were, taken right alongside Tyler. And we'll be going back to the Sebring 12-hour this year in March, and we'll be doing it all over again. So we'll have photos for you with that. But let's get right into it, because this might be a long one. We don't know. I'm going to probably say somewhere around the hour, maybe hour and 15 mark, but that's just a guess. Let's just roll and see how long we get. All right? All right.
Sounds good.
So real quick, what I wanted to say, and I wanted to kick this thing off, is something that really dawned on me over the weekend, or over watching all of these races, and really thinking about, some of the interviews that have gone on, some of the chaos that has gone on, is that we've asked these 16 to 23-year-old drivers to be professionals as soon as they have a mic shoved in their face. And I try to remember myself as a 16-year-old young man, and all the way up, to 20. And I'm not sure how I would have been able to handle myself. Now, I know they have it from a young age. They have a different upbringing. They're kind of bred into it, but still, as a young man, I know yourself, Tyler here, if nobody knows, maybe Tyler outside the show. Tyler's 17, correct?
Yes.
So you're a young man. So you got people your age racing professionally,
Yes.
millions of dollars floating around, and they're throwing microphones in their face. I can't believe how tough. How tough do you think it would be for you to step into that role?
It would be very difficult in my situation. I feel like as, a 16, 17-year-old child, or not child, but a young man, it would be difficult to be put into a situation where you have to become a professional instantly. Some of these guys may have been doing it since they were 8, 9 years old, but still, once your camera's in the face, it's different. It's definitely different to go from, being an adolescent to an adult right there.
Right, the face of a franchise, and one thing that you do or say can make or break the rest of your career as a 19-year-old.
Yes.
Let alone you possibly get into racing as a 30, 40-year-old. You might not even get there. I just always found that crazy. And then in other news, Juan Manuel Correa, if you remember him, he was part of the Antoine Hubert crash. He was the second driver in that. He really messed himself up. He's been rehabbing hard and strong, and he's back. He signed a Formula 3 deal with Art Racing, and really excited to have him back after such a devastating crash that could have definitely ended his career. So I'm just really happy that he came back. In other news, we got Denny Hamlin, FedEx, and Joe Gibbs Racing have all re-upped on a multi-year deal. So they all signed back up with each other, and they're going to continue running their their amazing relationship that they've had over the last few years. Denny Hamlin this year, if you don't know, he's won back-to-back Daytona 500s, so he's going for the three-peat, which has never been done before. Yarborough's never done it. It's never been done. So if Hamlin can do the three-peat, that would be very impressive. But I would be more impressed to see Hamlin get a damn championship. I mean, he's been chasing it for freaking forever, it seems like. And he always is right there at the end, and we'll see how he goes. Pierre Gasly came out over the weekend, I believe, and said he contracted COVID-19. He is positive. He is self-quarantining. And that raises a weird dynamic. And I want to, I'll bring Tyler in on this one to talk about this a little bit. He is the 6th driver in Formula One to become COVID-19 positive. Now, we've had, we're going to get into some of the drivers during the Daytona, the 24-hour Rolex that had COVID issues. But if you think about it, you look at other major sports, especially in the States here, you have, hockey, football, all those are basketballs all going on, where there's a lot more people involved in a very close area. And the ratio of Formula One drivers to actually get COVID-19 just seems astronomical, right? Am I wrong on that?
No, not at all. I mean, the difference between an full NBA team and a Formula One team is pretty significant. There's much less going on in Formula One. I mean, these drivers are in their own trailers. They're quarantined pretty much even without COVID. And for them to be getting COVID and these NBA players who are together all the time to not get it is pretty interesting.
I don't know if it's maybe the protocols that they have in place, but I just really figured that, with how Formula One works, I thought that we would have a lot less. To have 6 positive cases, you only have 20 drivers. That's amazing to me. Other things that happened over the weekend, the MX5 Cup. I know if Tyler was at Daytona. Tyler, did you watch this race when you were there?
No, I was not there during the race, but I did watch it on TV.
Okay.
It was a very interesting race.
Fire. If you don't know how the MX5 Cup works, they're all spec Miatas. They all are balance of powered out. They're all pretty much the same balance of power, and they drive fully based on momentum. If you lose momentum, you are done. The race is over for you. You might as well just go park it in the garage. If you lose the pack and you lose that slipstream, you're done. You just go park it in the garage. It's over. And the races were fantastic. The drivers were unreal. They were on each other's bumper. They were door to door the entire race. And coming across the finish line, especially in the first race, it was like an 8-way. It could have gone any way.
Yep. That's how the spec races usually work. I mean, they're all young drivers that are trying to move up in the ranks in motorsport, and they put everything on the line in these spec classes. And it is very interesting to watch. It's sometimes even better than the actual Rolex 24.
That's what I'm saying. I didn't expect a bunch of Miatas running around a racetrack to be so enthralling. It was great.
Very, very fun to watch. Very fun to watch.
Hell yeah. And then, so a couple of questions and a couple other, little pieces of news before we get into the roar. And we were talking about this once before, but I don't understand how. And you kind of try to explain it to me, and I still maybe didn't understand, and we can go over it again, but how Ferrari went from, battling it out in the top tier of endurance racing, all right? Especially, we all know the Ford versus Ferrari. We all seen the movie.
Yep.
If you haven't seen the movie, I don't know where the hell you've been for the last, year and a half. But we all know that the Ferrari and, that Ford Ferrari thing, and the Ford ended Ferrari's runs. But what happened to them? I feel like right there, they fell off. They stayed in it. They tried to stay at the top tier, but even now, they're in, GTLM, I think they were.
Yes, they're GTLM and GT3 racing.
So then what pulled them away from maybe going DPI or LMP1 and just trying to stay in the top tier?
They have scaled back a lot in the past few years. They were thinking of possibly doing LMDH, which is IMSA's regulations that match hypercar. But it seems as if they are having very difficult times finding sponsors, funding the team with their Formula One side and all their endurance racing. So in my opinion, they're not committed to a full blown LMP1 style team, which is why they're focusing more on customer based GT3, GTE Pro kind of machinery. It's sad because I would love to see a Ferrari in the top class again and for them to win championships and win Le Mans. But it seems as if they're not committed to doing that at this point.
That's amazing to me because if you know how the Formula One money works, they get like more money than anybody. Even if they don't win the championship, they get a whole nother lump sum of money because they made this deal where they've been in Formula One for so long, they get an extra crack of a couple of grand. And I understand like that Formula One is their bread and butter, and that's what they've been in for 50 something years. But I really thought LMDH or something like that, or Hypercar, I thought that was going to bring them back, especially the fact that Audi, Porsche, Renault, all these other big places are coming back in or jumping on the LMDH Hypercar wagon. I really thought Ferrari was going to do the same, and it just doesn't seem to be.
Yeah, it seems like they're very interested, but they're not making any moves towards making an LMDH team. You got to remember they do win in GT. They won Le Mans in 2019. They've been winning a lot of championships overseas in their GT3 programs. So they're still very relevant in the GT ranks, but they are not as relevant when it comes to overall LMDH, DPI, any of that right now, which is sad because I think that they could definitely pull off some pretty insane stuff if they would move up.
Sure.
In the ranks.
I definitely have to agree with you. And then on top of that, I wanted to get into the big news, I guess you can say, in endurance racing here in the States, at least. The GTLM category, it is done. The most expensive way that a manufacturer team, that can race in endurance racing here in the States is over. They are getting rid of it. Now, GTD, the GTD class that's here now, they have to have an amateur driver in the team. Am I correct in saying that?
Yes, it is a bronze driver.
Okay, so they have to have an amateur driver. Usually that's like a gentleman driver kind of thing.
Yeah. Yep.
Now they're getting rid of GTLM. Obviously, if you don't know, it's way too expensive, I believe. We've actually had this conversation while we were at Sebring. We talked about it a lot, how Corvette is pretty much the only full-time drive this year, which they're going through changes as well. BMW is only racing a few. Porsche pulled out. WeatherTech threw a Ferrari in there. No, WeatherTech pulled out of the Ferrari and threw a Porsche in there.
Yes,
but they're not even a manufacturer.
No, they are expected to make a full season, but they are not a manufacturer. They are manufacturer backed. So Porsche is helping and funding some of the team, and WeatherTech is the main sponsor and running the team. But Porsche is not really in IMSA right now.
So
they will be, however, in LMDH in 2023,
which is good.
They will be a full factory team.
Hell yeah! So GTLM is gone by the wayside. They threw that out the window and they replaced it with GTD Pro. Now, my understanding is it's pretty much GT3 cars, just like GTD, but with pro drivers. Are they going to be the same speed?
No, there will be a speed difference. The GTD Pro cars will be a little faster. To make sure that these pro drivers can fight against the pro cars and not the amateur cars. Most likely it will be maybe aero, maybe weight, not really engine performance as much, because the cars will still be full-blown GT3 spec cars. And right now, the only team that does not have a GT3 car is Corvette Racing.
Ooh.
Every team in IMSA right now with a GT car has a GT3 car ready to go. So Corvette is up in the air right now.
I would say I would expect them to jump on the bandwagon and do it especially if they want to keep racing.
Yes. So here's how I look at it. LMDH does not officially begin until 2023, which means that there will be at least 1 year gap between LMDH and DPI, or LMDH and the discontinuation of GTLM. So if Corvette Racing had to race again, or if they wanted to race again in 2022, they would have to go GTD Pro. They have no choice because LMDH does not officially begin until 2023. So I believe that what they're going to do, and I talked to Rob Woodham about this at Daytona, was they're going to build a GT3 car with Pratt and Miller, feel it out for a few years maybe, and then jump into LMDH later on after, everything settles down with the GT class and everything like that. But that's what we expect.
That makes sense.
They could go a completely different direction, but if they want to race in 2022, they could go DPI, but it's kind of useless for one season. Or they could just go into GT3 and possibly sell the car overseas, which is another option they have. If they go DPI, they'll only have 1 year with the car and there's no other place to sell it.
Right.
So it's much more sensible for them to go GTD Pro for at least one season, keep the car, keep manufacturing the car, sell it over time to overseas and
just support
people
a customer
in
team.
IMSA. Exactly. And then do a pro team in LMDH later on.
How do you feel? Do you think GTD Pro is going to revitalize what, you think it's going to fill that GTLM spot well? Do you think it's going to be successful?
I do believe it will be a very successful class. I think with the amount of manufacturers that are in GT3, you got to remember, I don't know if you do remember, in the ALMS days, GT2 was the kind of the GT3 class that is today.
Right. It was the too expensive thing.
Yeah. GT1 is the really expensive, kind of morphed into GTE Pro. GT2 had about 6 or 7 manufacturers when it first started. GT3 has over 12 manufacturers around the world.
Right.
That's a significant amount of manufacturers that are racing in GT3.
Sure.
Which means that GTD Pro could have 12 different manufacturer-backed racing teams competing all at once, which means we could have a 4-car field of just GT Pro teams, which I think is insane.
Of course.
GTLM in its prime, I think only had 8 cars.
Right.
This has the potential of having 24 plus cars.
That's a huge field.
Is huge. Yes.
Huge field. So, and then, you think about where this is going with the new hypercar, the LMDH, and now they can cross over and race each other's races. How many cars can be fielded in a Rolex 24? And then on top of that, having a GTD Pro category that might have 20 cars. GTD this year had a ton of cars. That was, I think, the biggest class.
Yes, biggest class on the field. They always show up. They always have a huge field of cars, and they're always very competitive. That's one of the things that GT3 is really good with, is they're very competitive. The BOP is very, very accurate. I mean, the lap times are almost identical, and these are front-engine Mercedes versus mid-engine Ferraris, and you wouldn't think they would be very competitive together, and yet they're within 0.5 of a second a lap. I mean, it's very identical.
Awesome
for these cars.
I can't wait for that. Right now, we're going to take a quick break, and we will get into the roar before the 24 right after this. All right, welcome back. All right, so we're going to get into the roar before the 24. A few things that we're going to go over. This is kind of short. I mean, it's a short race. How long is the roar before this? It's only like...
It's 3 days long, and it's multiple sessions. There's midday sessions, there's late night sessions, and they're usually only an hour to 2 hours long.
And then the race itself, the qualifying race is...
The qualifying race is new. This year, it was 100 minutes. So it was an hour and 40 minutes.
Okay.
It was brand new this year, never been done before for qualifying for the Rolex.
How'd you like it?
And it was insane. Insane. It was very, very good to watch some of these teams that, are brand new, like Chip Ganassi Racing coming back. They're not brand new by any means. They're not brand new, but their team of drivers are brand new to coming back into IMSA. And it was just incredible to see how competitive some of these brand new teams are. And basically, it was a preview to how the Rolex 24 was going to look like, and it really showed to be a really good way of qualifying for the Rolex 24.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I liked how it was like a race to qualify for a bigger race. Like normally you get on the track and you have to lap faster and you take the one lap time and that's how but this really threw a wrench into a lot of work because a lot of teams that you thought might start at the front, a lot of the faster teams, they can run into a problem. You can mess up a pit stop, you could screw up a strategy. Instead of it being only solely on the driver and how the car was set up to run that one fast time, I feel like might be a new way that they can do racing in general because it took it away from the one driver and the car setup to now you are judged on your pit crew, you're judged on your engineering, you're judged on your chief, you're judged on the spotting, how the car is running, if the car is going to last, the driver. This was huge, and I really liked how they did it because it adds a very team aspect into it. It takes a little bit away from the driver being the only one to be able to pull that thing, and now it's a full team aspect. I enjoyed it.
I enjoyed it as well, and it was really the biggest thing was it not eliminated, but it reduced sandbagging because teams were forced to show pace. They had to show pace. IMSA, I don't know if you saw in the race, but the announcers were talking about it, how IMSA has all of the data. They know when you're pushing, they know if you're putting your 100%
They're like Santa Claus.
Yes, they know everything. Everything. It was really interesting because it really eliminates people who are trying to get past the BOP and trying to maintain their pace without showing it. And it was a really good way of showing how to eliminate that in the future, especially at the next race is coming up. Sandbagging is going to be very different.
And it definitely, I feel like it caught out a couple of teams, like we were talking before. BMW, I feel like it caught them out a little bit, and I feel like everyone expected them to come out and just overpower and be able to run with the Corvettes, and I didn't see that happen. I feel like during the Roar they were competitive, and then when they got to the Rolex, the 24, I can't say they struggled because we can get when we talk about the 24, we'll definitely get into how they did, but they weren't there. So I feel like this was, to weed out the ones that sandbag, this was a great way to do it because you had to perform. You have an hour and 40 minutes of telemetry and of data that they can judge by.
Yeah, the BOP after the Roar was fairly harsh on BMW. They added 50 kilograms of weight to their car.
Jesus, that's
which
a lot.
is very, very, it's a very big number for a race car. But in the past, a lot of teams would just kind of slow down. They, let other teams fight and get BOP hit and all that stuff. But this race, you had to go, you had to push, you had to show everything that you had.
Especially in the bigger classes, especially in something like GTD all the way down at the bottom. Like you got to think there's so many cars in that class. If you did try to sandbag, and you came in out of the top 10, it's very hard to make up those spots during the race. And even though, strategy and anything can happen in endurance racing, still, you don't want to start outside the top 10 in any type of endurance racing, in my opinion. But what we really saw during that race specifically, and then obviously it carried over into the 24-hour, was the fact that drivers, if you don't know, there were 14. All right, I counted 14 notable drivers from other series or other types of driving.
Yes.
Formula One, IndyCar, NASCAR. I think that's
DTM.
What was
BMW brought a bunch of DTM drivers.
Okay, there you go.
Almost their entire team was a DTM team.
So you think about it in that scenario, how there are so many different types of drivers, so many different experiences, all racing now, and not all of them did DPI, not all of them did GTD. They were all spread out all over the place. Obviously, the big names were all in the DPI class, and that's what everybody was watching. But they were in all categories, and I feel like it was interesting to watch NASCAR drivers and Formula One drivers and IndyCar drivers try to adapt to the new technology or new to them technology. Whereas obviously Formula One drivers seem to adapt really well. The speed is almost the same. All right. The grip is almost the same. So Kevin Magnussen jumped in to the, during the Roar. And I mean, I love watching him drive a DPI car. He was ripping around, but people like Jimmy Johnson and Chase Elliott, who drive a full body car and aren't used to going so deep into turns, were having trouble or seem to be having trouble picking out braking points and things like that and trusting the brakes. And I really thought like maybe it would be better to see them in the GTLM or GTD categories instead of in a prototype car. But I don't know. I really found it interesting to watch those drivers jump into those cars and see how it went.
Yeah, Kevin Magnussen, he was a star in that car. I mean, he jumped in. I mean, I think they said he only had 2 tests before jumping into the Rolex and going pretty much all out. He put in some fantastic lap times. I mean, he pretty much helped that team get to where they were at the end. Unfortunately, we all know what happened at the end. We'll talk about that later. But
sure.
I mean, he put that car in a really good position to win that race. You wouldn't think somebody who's never been in a Cadillac DPI would do so well. I mean, he got in and looked like he was, Ringer van der Zande, who's been racing in DPI since it started. I mean, he was fantastic. But yeah, Johnson and Chase Elliott they seemed to be very uncomfortable in the car. I mean, Johnson did admit he was nervous, but he was very excited in the car. I didn't hear much about Elliott, but I mean, they did not seem like they had the pace to keep up with Magnussen and that Chip Ganassi team.
I'm interested to see what the splits were between Magnussen and somebody like van der Zande. Now, I would say that van der Zande, and we'll talk about this when we get to the 24, that man was fucking possessed, bro. He was,
yes.
I was very impressed with how he drove, and I would be hard pressed to think that they will not be very successful in that car this year. But I always said, in watching, I'm a Formula One fan. You've been watching this show for any longer than 20 minutes. You'll know that I love Formula One. It is slowly becoming not my favorite form of racing. However, it's still up there. But watching him race Formula One, I always said that I felt like he would do better in a closed-wheeled car, like something in DPI, and that's only the fact that he likes to play it on the edge. It's not a bad thing by any means, but you can kind of bump and maybe get away with it in DPI. You can kind of come together and kind of rub a little. You can't do that in Formula One. You're just going to spin off into
not
oblivion.
at all. Formula One cars are, I wouldn't want to say sensitive, but they are. They're very sensitive to bumps. They don't like being...
Take a Formula One car to Sebring and tell me they're not sensitive.
Exactly. They will not make it past lap 5.
No.
These DPI cars and these GT cars and these LMP2s, they are made to take a beating. I mean, you wouldn't think a car could run 24 hours straight. I mean, these cars are running engines that are crazy hot. I mean, the brakes, constantly on the brakes. You're constantly over bumps, and these cars take it, and they absorb the bumps, and they go as fast as they can, and they make 24 hours. I mean, it's insane. But if you put a Formula One car out there, like you said at Sebring, around turn 17,
done.
Everything's falling off. It
would rattle your cavities. Yeah, it would rattle your fillings loose. What I found really crazy was, and I don't know if I just never thought about it. It's really weird to me, but the thought of a Cadillac DPI car having a V8 naturally aspirated engine, and then an Acura having a 2-liter. So that V8 is a 6.3 liter engine.
Yes.
And the Acura is a 2.0 liter twin turbo. And you're like, mind fucking blown. And they were talking on how fueling and pit stops would work with those cars, but I baffled.
Yes, it is all about weight. I mean, the Cadillacs, they weigh a lot less in the chassis and in the technology that they have in that car. And the Mazdas and the Acuras weigh more, but it's all because of the engine size. I mean, that's a 6.2 liter, I believe, in that Cadillac.
Yeah, that's like 6.2, 6.3, something like that.
That is a big engine, and it makes a lot of power, but it is a big engine. And
sounds great too, by the way.
It sounds amazing. It's probably the best sounding prototype you'll ever hear. I mean, it's insane. But you wouldn't think a small engine Mazda would be, hunted down by a big 6.2 liter V8 Cadillac.
Right.
I mean, it's insane to see how close these guys get, even with the weight difference that you would think with a V8 versus a 2-liter turbocharged engine. I mean, it's insane.
I will say that, Corvette did something interesting, and it looked like during the Roar, and I'm not on a Corvette and I don't have anybody behind the scenes, but it looked like they split their strats. It really did look like one vet did really well in the wet. I believe, maybe it was a set of tires or the setups they used. And then the other Corvette, not that it struggled, but it wasn't as fast. 100% wasn't as fast. And I feel like that was like a strategic call. You think they're one of the only teams that has two cars in that class. I think BMW did as well. But,
yes.
If they split their strat, yes, they might sacrifice starting. However, in that class, there were only 7 cars, I think.
There were 6 cars.
6 cars. So you only have 6 cars in that class. You're not even starting outside the top 10, like I said before. I feel like splitting that strat to get as much data as possible was really smart if they did that.
Yes, they do that every single year. It seems that the 3 car usually has the better strategy. But in the past, the 4 car has won Daytona. They have won Sebring. And really, Daytona is the biggest test for them because the cars are set up very similar. And really, Daytona, whoever scores higher at Daytona usually gets the better strategy for the rest of the season. And that's really just it's a team strategy. Whoever has the more points at the beginning of the season is going to end up having, the better strategy for the rest of the season to win the manufacturer's championship. But it did seem like the 4 car was better at the Roar and was better at the Rolex, but it really came down to pit stops.
Right.
I watched from the grandstands, I watched the 2 Corvettes drag race out of the pit stops. It was whoever got out first, that was who was in the lead, and that's who got the better strategy at that time. And that's what they usually do at the Roar and the Rolex is they figure out which team seems strongest and they give them the better strategy, but it's whoever wins pretty much.
I really like that because it allows the drivers, it allows the teams to go at it. But another thing that they did, they raced each other very clean. They were very close on track through the Roar, through the
3
24.
car raced very hard throughout the entire race. They switched strategies during the pit stops. But when it came down to racing, they were very respectful with each other because you take out your 2 cars and you're done.
Right.
So, and they were very respectful racing on the track, but it was very close and very competitive.
Right. Yeah. It was pretty impressive. So there were 2 other really crazy things that I really wanted to get into, maybe 3. From the Roar. One of them being Stephen Thomas, who I've never heard of before, driving an LMP2 car. He was leading most of the race in the Roar.
Yes.
Has only been driving professionally for 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
You're driving professionally for 2 years and you're leading the Roar and did really well in the Rolex 24. In an LMP2 car, those aren't pushover cars. It's not like he's doing a GTD.
LMP2 cars actually raced with DPI about 2 or 3 years ago. They were in the same class, and those cars are no joke. Those are very fast race cars. They're putting in times that are insanely fast. I mean, these are 2 seconds, in between the DPI cars, and it just makes it to where, for these guys that are not professional to be put into such a professional race car, it makes it very interesting to watch these guys race and, see how they do compared to these amateurs that are in these cars. Right.
The other thing was the Acura NSX. Not my favorite livery, but one of my favorite liveries was the Speed Racer livery. So I just want to know how that looked while you were at the track.
It was very, very cool to see in person. I did not like it in pictures.
Really?
I thought it was a very, what's the word? Like
too simple?
Too simple. Not complex, not cool looking.
Right.
And when you see it in person, the white with the yellow headlights and the red accents. It just looks so good.
Fucking that
So
Speed
good.
Racer is so sexy.
It looks so good in person.
Hell yeah. I would say
love that livery.
The biggest disappointing livery, and what's funny is I know my brother liked it.
Mm-hmm.
The 01 Chip Ganassi.
That was a very, very disappointing livery.
What happened?
It seemed like they had no other sponsor than Cadillac. The only logo on the car was Cadillac on the fin.
They didn't put any colors on it? Like they gave
no
like a little bit of
colors,
red,
nothing.
but that was about it. I was like,
it was way too simple for Chip Ganassi Racing, and I think it was very disappointing. Very disappointing.
Hopefully, maybe, they did very well in the race. Yes. Hopefully they can pull in maybe a sponsor from that and maybe slap another color on that car.
Yeah,
change it up a little bit.
Yeah, it was interesting to see how plain and boring that car looked. I mean, it looked good, but you can do better for Chip Ganassi Racing.
Hell yeah, of course. And then the only other thing that I had written down from the Roar was the WeatherTech Porsche. I think that they raced a hell of a strategic race.
Yes.
And they did fabulous in that.
They were very off pace. If you didn't notice, they were sixth in every single session in the Roar. 6 out of 6, they were at the bottom. They were probably a second or two off the pace, which you wouldn't think that's a lot, but in GTLM, usually the times from 1 to 6 are within 1 second. I mean, it's very close, and they were very off the pace, but they made it a very good strategy for the Roar race, the 100-minute pole race. Very good strategy, put them in third to start the Rolex. Unfortunately, that didn't work out so well at the Rolex.
Yeah.
But they definitely put themselves in a very good position to start the race.
For sure.
Unfortunately,
we're about to get into that. So the pole sitters coming out of the Roar were the number 31 Durrani was driving. So that's the Whelen Engineering Cadillac. LMP2 was the number 52 driven by Jensen. Strong car, champion last year. We all figured, that 52 was going to be pole sitting, for LMP2. For LMP3 was the number 6. For GTLM, GTLM was the number 4 Corvette. Tandy was driving that one.
Yes.
And then GTD, the number 96, driven by the man himself, Bill Auberlen.
Yep.
I did not. Don't get me wrong, Turner Motorsports, fabulous team. Auberlen was teamed with an IndyCar driver, Colton Herta.
Yes, Colton Herta. He usually drives for Team RLL.
Which I didn't expect him to jump into the BMW, but...
Yeah, it was odd. BMW kind of took a different approach this year with how they wanted their teams run, and he kind of ended up with Bill Auberlen and Turner Motorsport, which is pretty cool to watch.
Well, it was cool because Auberlen, there's a picture of Auberlen holding Colton Herta when he's a kid, when he's a baby.
Yeah, yep.
And now they're racing on the same team.
It's like seeing George Russell and Lewis Hamilton together.
Yeah, it's
when they were younger,
right? So you see that like Russell getting a hat signed by Lewis Hamilton,
exactly.
And then they're racing on the same. It's amazing. It was amazing.
Mm-hmm.
But that's all I have for the Roar. We're gonna get into the Rolex 24-hour. Do you have anything else to add in for the Roar? You were there, so I don't know if you saw anything.
The Roar was very, I don't want to say boring, but it was very, organized well. None of the teams had any big incidents. Oh, one incident. The Wright Racing Porsche had to rebuild their entire car after the Motul, or right before the pole race.
Wright Racing is the blue first form, right?
Porsche. Yes, the blue first form Porsche. Ryan Hardwick was driving the car, and he took a corner, I guess, too fast, and just destroyed the entire car. Had to buy the Black Swan Racing car off of them because they were not racing because of COVID. And they had to rebuild their entire car in one day before the pole award race, and they did pretty well.
Think about that. Think about
Hardwick
that, though.
Yeah.
You got the right racing team wrecks a car. The stars, and I'm
Yes.
not saying it's a blessing that the whole team got COVID and had to back out, but I mean, think about it. The stars
them,
had
it
to
was.
align. The stars
Yes.
had to align for them
Mhm.
to be able to just walk over there and be like, hey, here's some cash. Can I have that car? And then have to rebuild it pretty much
Yes.
to their specs and how they wanted to race the car.
Yes. Unfortunately, though, Ryan Hardwick ended up having a concussion
Really?
after his GT4 race, because he raced in GT4 in the TCR GT4 Michelin Pilot Challenge. He, I guess, had an accident during their race 2, I believe, and he had a concussion and had to forfeit his seat to another driver for the Rolex 24.
Brutal.
Yeah,
Brutal.
it was very, very strange to see that, but yeah, he had to leave because of concussion.
Unreal. All right, the roar is over, and when we come back, we're going to talk about the Rolex 24. All right, here we go into the Rolex 24. This was the bread and butter. This was the one we all waited for. This is the unofficial start to the world racing calendar, we would say. There have been some races before this. The 24 Hours of Dubai, I believe, was like a week before or 2 weeks before. So there is some racing here and there, but it just seems like the Rolex 24, it seems like those are all warm-ups. Those are all like the practice in the off-season kind of thing. Like, I know lots of times with hockey, they'll go over to like Russia and they'll play over there to kind of warm themselves up, get themselves ready for the pace of the regular season in the NHL. And I feel like a lot of those races are like that for the Rolex 24. So if you're still with us 40 minutes in, we're still going and we're just getting into the Big Daddy. But the Rolex 24, overall, before we get into news and how crazy things were, for somebody like yourself who was there, overall, how did you like this Rolex 24, the 2021 version?
It was amazing. I wouldn't say it was as good as 2020, of course, with all the cautions. 2020 set a new lap record with 833 laps completed. We only completed 807, which is still an amazing number for how many cautions we ended up having. But it was very, very good, especially since I'm a Corvette racing fan. It was an amazing race. 1-2 finish. Got to watch them cross the line. It was amazing. But it was a great race. I mean, I had no complaints about anything pretty much when it comes to this race.
I would say that watching it from home was awesome. I watched it most of the day Saturday afternoon. I had to get some sleep because Sunday I had work. While I was at work, I was able to kind of pull myself away from what I was doing, maybe while I was repairing stuff and things like that and turning some wrenches, excuse me. And I was able to like listen, hear, and thank God. I don't know who made my schedule, but my hour break was right at the end of the race.
Oh, that's awesome.
So I was able to sit there and it was... It was
a very, very eventful last 2 hours of the race.
It was stressful. We're gonna talk about that, and we're not gonna talk about just the last hour of the race. We're gonna kind of just go over it as we go through the teams and the drivers and the news that we had. So this Rolex 24 was special for some of the people they had up in the call box, specifically Dale Earnhardt Jr. I like how they brought him in as a commentator on this. It's not his wheelhouse, endurance racing. He's a NASCAR guy. However, some people might not know this. This is the 20th anniversary of him and his father racing for Corvette during the Daytona 24. So big for him.
Yes.
Very
big for him.
I would say, like, being able to sit there up in the box and relive that and then watch the Corvettes come across the line 1-2.
I would love to see him one of these years climb into a Corvette and race at the Rolex 24. He said it. He would love to do it. I don't know if that was, a full, I want to do it, but I would love to see him get into a Corvette and relive that moment that he had with his dad.
Hell yeah.
At the Rolex 24. It'd be awesome.
And if anybody, I don't know if this was right in the beginning, but it stood out enough to me to where I had to write this down. Did anybody else hear the 5 minutes of cooking chicken stories inside the car? Now, I know you didn't hear it because you were at the track.
Yeah.
And honestly, I'm just jealous at that anyway, so to hell with you. but 5 minutes of the announcers talking about how they used to cook chickens on the transmission covers and stuff like that inside the car during races, and then they would go ahead and eat them after the race. I found that was like one of the craziest things. My mind was blown that they would be talking about that for 5 minutes. But to move on past that, let's get into one more thing. Hold on one second. So another crazy thing that I really saw was the age range of some of these drivers. They said it, and they really were adamant about it. I think there were one or two drivers at age 16, and then there was
2 drivers on one team in LMP3, 16 years old.
And I think the oldest driver, who was 75, was also in an LMP3.
Yes. I think they were on the same team, actually.
Get out of here.
I believe it was 3 drivers, 2 16-year-olds, and 1 74-year-old, if I'm not mistaken. But I believe that was actually who it was.
That's ridiculous. Can you imagine being 16 driving in the Rolex 24?
I'm jealous. I'm so jealous. I'm 17 years old, and I could be racing at the Rolex 24.
Oh, my God. That's unreal. That's unreal.
Insane. I mean, Lance Stroll did it when he was 18.
But you think about it, like
for Chip Ganassi Racing at the 2016 Rolex 24. He did it at 18 years old. I mean, I would love to do this stuff.
But I would say, like, if you don't watch a lot of endurance racing, I know a lot on this show. This is the first real big show that we've done about endurance racing. For those not little cars, but the slower cars, LMP2, not as much because they are still pretty quick. But the LMP3, the GTD cars, they're almost looking in their rearview mirrors more than they're looking out of their front windshield.
I feel like it is actually harder to be a lower class driver than to be a DPI driver, because you are constantly looking behind you, what cars are coming up, looking at flags for passing. And it's very, very complicated when you think about it for, these drivers in these lower class cars to have to try to fight their own class and worry about a faster DPI or LMP2 car right up their, rear view mirror. It's scary.
I kind of equate it to being on like I-95. We live down here in Florida, so I-95 is about the craziest you can really kind of get. And it's a lot easier to drive on 95 when you're going faster than everyone else. And, I think people will always be like, well, why are you driving so fast? Because I know where I'm going to be. I know how far my car is going to be. If you're getting passed by everybody, it's a nerve-wracking feeling to have to look and can I change lanes now? It's a lot easier when you're faster than everybody else.
Yeah, you have to know where you want to position your car. A lot of times it is better to just stay where you are on the track than to try to get out of somebody's way, because they're already going to be initiating that pass. And if you get into their lane, we've seen it before. GT cars accidentally take out faster LMP cars. It happens all the time, but unfortunately it's because of that speed difference and because of those, not even amateur drivers, some professional drivers. It's very difficult, especially at a 24-hour event, to know who you're racing, because we see in the LMP or the DPI, the LMP3 and the GTLM cars all have white headlights.
Right.
They all used to be different. It used to be GT cars with yellow, LMPs with white headlights, but they all have white headlights now. So you have to judge who is coming up behind you, because you don't want to give up position to a slower car. You don't want to give up position to your own class.
That's crazy.
But you don't want to get into somebody's way that's coming faster. It's very, very difficult for these drivers that are in lower class cars to judge who they're racing, especially at night.
We saw that with the Mustang sampling. Almost was driven off track by, I want to say it was an LMP2 car, but what happened was the LMP2 car looked like it was trying to get out of the way. The Mustang sampling car already had made its decision and almost drove itself into the grass. So I did see that.
Yeah, it's better to stay in your own lane, let the faster car pass you, and then reposition yourself to get back on that racing line. But it's very difficult, and indeed, very difficult.
I think one of the craziest things also to think about is those 16-year-old kids don't even have a driver's license yet.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean,
and they're racing some of the most powerful cars
I imagine
in the world.
myself in my car sometimes. I'm shifting the paddles. I don't even have paddles. I'm just I imagine myself being a racing driver, and these kids are actually living the dream in an
Unreal.
LMP3 car. I mean, it's insane.
That's crazy. So there was one thing that I really did want to get into about how it upset me a little bit. And that's the coverage outside of the DPI class. Now,
Yes.
again, you were at the race, so you didn't see the television coverage as much. You probably maybe saw it when you went back to the hotel and grabbed a nap. Maybe you just went back to sleep.
Oh, no hotel here. It was called the back of my car.
Oh, really? Oh,
yes, we slept in the car.
That's the way to go, man. But
it was great.
hey, that's the way you do it. I mean, are you able to tent up there? Can you?
No, this year they completely shut down tenting. No tenting, no car camping, unless you're outside of the stadium. It was only RVs, and it was fine sitting in the parking lot and listening to the cars go around. That Porsche kept me up all night.
Oh yeah.
If you haven't heard the Porsche in person, it is very loud, especially on the banking of Daytona when it echoes off the banking. It's very loud.
Yeah,
but it's awesome.
I can imagine, but I just felt like don't get me wrong, great battles in DPI and some of the big names in DPI and some of the faster cars in DPI. So it gets, but I feel like they dropped the ball a little bit with some of the GTLM battles. When they were having battles, they saw them, but the GTD even like LMP2 is usually very competitive. GTD cars are very competitive because the balance of power is so strong. And there were really good battles going on that I feel like they didn't cover them until like either way later in the race when things were getting down to it.
They're usually very good with splitting it up, maybe giving each class about 15, 20 minutes of coverage each at a time. It was very, very, from what you said, it was very unorganized, a lot of just DPI. I understand Jimmy Johnson, Chase Elliott.
I don't know if I saw a GTD pit stop until the end of the race.
It happens a lot. At Le Mans actually is the worst. It is usually only LMP2 coverage because, well, with LMP1, it's usually just Toyota at the front. In GTE Pro, there's not usually enough cars to, give a battle. In 2019, there was a lot of coverage because there was about 12 cars in that class. It was great. But last year, there was only 6. So you really didn't see much of that. You didn't see much of GTE AM. But since there were so many cars in LMP2, there was 20 plus cars in LMP2. That's all you saw, which is hard because a lot of people like GT racing. A lot of people like to see the Toyotas on TV, but they never show that.
Right.
And I think that needs to change because a lot of people like to see Corvette racing, BMW racing. They don't care as much. Some people don't care as much about the prototype racing.
Well, it's like you can go out and buy a Porsche. You can go out and buy a Ferrari. You can't go out and buy a DPI car and take it on the road.
GT racing is the cars that you can buy from a manufacturer. They look very similar. Of course, they're very different, but they're very similar to the road cars. And those are the cars you want to see battling each other. You want to see a sleek mid-engine Corvette go against a big BMW M8, and they're virtually identical on on Daytona.
Right.
I mean, it's very cool to watch. And myself, I love GT much more than LMP. I think it's a much more interesting class. I love seeing the difference between a road car and a wide body GT race car. I think they're so beautiful. But a lot of people are the same way. They love GT more than LMP, but they have to figure out a way to give coverage to everybody.
Right.
Because some people can't be at the track to watch their battles that they want to watch. So you got to give everybody a chance to see what they want to see, and just covering when battles are happening, it's not fun for everybody.
Right. I hear you. So right in the beginning of the race, we'll talk about the controversy that happened, and this. And you think it's a 24-hour race. Everybody's going to kind of get up to speed and do their thing. And I'm not going to lie, the first 4 hours for BMW were a little rough.
It was rough.
A little rough.
They instigated a lot of accidents. They were involved in a lot. Most notably, I think we're about to go into it, was the Porsche incident.
The green flag.
At the beginning of the race. I remember watching the pace lap, the Porsche would come around. As soon as the first lap started, the Porsche came back around, front bumper was crooked, and the rear bumper was ripped in half. And I was like, what just happened?
Yeah,
and it
unreal.
wasn't until hour 3 that I figured out that the BMW turned the car around on the front straight. And luckily, he didn't get hit from the
And
side.
didn't hit anybody.
That was very good driving by the GT Daytona cars that were behind this.
Sure.
Because, I mean, that car could have been in a lot worse of a situation for the drivers and all the teams around them. But it was very odd because from the BMW driver's perspective, it was the Porsche didn't get on the power in time. The BMW, got up to speed, hit him from behind, turned him.
I heard
the
what
WeatherTech guys are blaming. It's
what happened. And this is 100% clear. You can watch it on the video. The Corvettes never went, so the Porsche never went. And the BMWs heard green, and they went, and they ran right into the back of the Porsche. Now, in the interviews, the BMWs were like, "Oh, everybody went," and then the Porsche let off. The Porsche never let off. Nobody ever went. So, and I understand jumping the gun, and Ferrari got lucky too, because that Porsche, if it hit any farther forward or any farther back, it hit literally right in the middle of the door, to the point where, and I don't know if you saw this at the track, they actually went into the back and grabbed a new Ferrari door because they didn't know if they were going to be able to get the door open at the pit stop.
I did see that.
Unreal.
I wanted to point out with the Corvettes, like you said, they didn't go. They brought back something that has been implemented in the past, and it's split starts. Last year at the Rolex and at every race, all the cars would start at the same time. The GTs, the DPIs, the LMP2s, all of them would start at the same time. But with the implementation of the LMP3
That's a
cars,
college word, bro.
With the implementation of the LMP3 cars and them being so close on pace to the GT cars, they had to make it to
allegedly
where there had to be a space between the LMP3s and the GTLM front runners.
Right.
And that's the reason that the Corvettes were controlling the pace, and that's the reason that they had a choice to go or not. And a lot of times we saw this last year with the Porsches at some of the GT-only events. They like to stop and go very slow when you would think they want to go fast, and that's because the Corvettes and the Porsches last year, they want to be on the power first. They want to go at a specific time that not many teams would go at, because they want to jump. They want to go, right ahead, get away from the field. So that's the whole reason that the Corvettes didn't go. I think that the whole situation with the Porsche and the BMW might not have been completely the Corvette's fault. I think it could have been both of them. Maybe the Porsche didn't get on the power in time, and maybe the BMW was quicker.
Yeah.
Who knows? But I think it was definitely a very sketchy situation. And I mean, BMW didn't really help their case after that incident.
No, they dumped the
incidents.
They dumped the LMP3 leader in a couple of, I would say about maybe an hour in. I would say 3 hours in. I can't remember, but there
was many cautions.
There was no way he literally dumped him. He was like, you know what? I had enough of you driving next to me. Boom, goodbye. And that was it. Plain and simple. That's exactly what happened. Like, you can't. There had to be a penalty for that. I was so surprised. There was, happened.
I believe, a drive-through penalty for the 25 car after the Porsche incident. Unreal. I do not believe they got a penalty for the LMP3 car.
He straight up dumped that dude. That guy was in the way, and he needed to go, and he was like, "Goodbye, see you later." Boop. Let's get into the 01 Chip Ganassi car. We're gonna do their whole race. So, spoiler alert: if you're waiting until the end to see this, we're already an hour in, and we're not even close to being done. So, we're gonna be rolling all night here if you're okay with it. But
I'm okay with that.
The 01 Chip Ganassi car, Renger van der Zandt, Kevin Magnussen,
Kayumi Kobayashi, I believe.
No, he's in the 48.
Oh, no, it was Mike Rockenfeller.
Rockenfeller, that's it.
Yes.
All in that 01 Ganassi car, and man, was it fast. Magnussen was fast. It was up at the front the whole race, and I really want to talk about Van der Zandt, because if you don't know the story, Renger van der Zandt used to race for Cadillac still a Cadillac, but he raced for Wayne Taylor Racing. He was with them for a good while, from my recollection. And he thought he had a job wrapped up until about August of last year, when we all knew that they were jumping from Cadillac to Acura. We kind of figured that was coming. That was kind of mainstream news, but we all assumed that Van der Zand was going to make the jump with the other drivers that they had. And apparently they didn't want to take him. I don't know what happened behind the scenes. There was whatever issues that they did have. He didn't make the switch. So he was pretty much left without a drive. I don't know if he called Ganassi or Ganassi called him, but what a fucking pickup, because the guy is a gem. Because
I just want to correct something. It was not Rockefeller. It's actually Scott Dixon.
Right. Damn, I should have known that because they were talking about that.
I wanted to correct that so that nobody kind of flamed us for that.
Oh, but, sure.
Yeah, it was Scott Dixon.
We already got flamed. They already left a comment.
Yeah, exactly.
No, you're right though. It was Dixon. I should have known because Dixon is a Ganassi guy. But they all three of them, hella fast. And Van der Zand specifically, I cannot wait to watch that car run the rest of the year. If you don't know what happened, they ran a hell of a race. Van der Zand obviously wanted to win. Obviously wanted to stick it to Wayne Taylor Racing. They raced a hell of a race. Dixon, unfortunately, with 3 hours to go, had a right rear tire get cut down, which kind of put them back on the back foot a little bit. They came in and replaced the tire, and they were talking about it on TV, and I have to agree with them. It didn't even seem like they tried to really fix anything. They didn't look at to why the tire was cut down. They kind of just moved on.
I watched the pit stop from the grandstands, and he came in. They had the tire ready. They took it off, put a new tire back on, and went. It seemed like there was no damage to the car, which is very lucky because we've seen it in the past, and this was actually last year. Rizzi Competizione, the Ferrari and GTLM, they retired the car with 2 hours left to go after a right rear puncture. And it was because in these tires, they have wires. And if the wires become too undone, they'll wrap around the axle. And at that point, it makes it to where the axle can't move, and it kind of destroys it. And luckily, that did not happen to this car. And it was just the tire kind of shredded apart, and they were able to put on a new tire. But some teams have had to actually retire because of these tires coming apart and just destroying the corners of the cars.
My thing that I noticed was I really wish they would have maybe stuck their head in there. And the only reason why I say that is this. If you kept watching the race, there was about 7 minutes left to go, which equates out to about 4 laps-ish. Van der Zand is within 2 seconds of Wayne Taylor Racing in first. Van der Zand's in second, and he is running them down. I mean, there was at times where I think he was catching them by almost 3 seconds a lap. So the guy was flying. And you could tell Wayne Taylor Racing was stressing a little bit. They were showing Wayne Taylor on the box, and he had his head in his hands and his hands over his mouth, and he was freaking out. And same thing happens. Right rear tire goes down on Van der Zand. He has to come in, brutal gutting. They finished 5th. And I really was pulling for them to get the win, not only for Van der Zand, but I really wanted Magnussen, to go 10 years or however long he was in Formula One, never even taste a podium or come close to really winning a race. It's just brutal to be able to go in to work every day and be like, well, I won everything on the way here, but you know what? Now that I'm in Formula One, I won't even smell 10th today. And there's nothing I could do to change that. I really wanted him to get a win, especially Scott Dixon, reigning champion IndyCar, get a win. That would have been hell of a Cinderella story. And I don't know if maybe just sticking a head in when Scott Dixon had his blowout would have maybe helped, because was it the car that cut down the tire, or was it
from what I and from the situation that unfolded, if it was the same corner,
those AirPods died, huh?
Yeah, they did. It was the same corner, right? The right rear, I believe.
Yes.
On both occasions. If that were to happen the same time, the same situation, that has to be a car situation. It can't be something on the track happening twice at the same corner. I think the fender or something may have been damaged, or there must have been something that would
there had to be a
run
rub
down that tire, because there's no way that it could have happened twice within 3 hours of that. I mean, it was very odd to see that. And I think Van der Zand said it himself in an interview. He believes it was the car's setup. He thinks that at some point the right rear had an issue with the setup, and that's the reason that the whole thing cut down. And I mean, they went from right there to fifth place, and that's how close DPI was the entire race.
Right. That was tough. I mean, real quick, do you have any other headphones that you could throw in or no?
No, it's okay. I'm fine.
All right, no worries. So yeah, it's just it was amazing to me. I really thought that there was going to be, some kind of check. Usually, when you get a cut down tire, they reach their head in there, they look for anything, and it just didn't seem. I feel like they just moved on, and they expected that it was going to be the track. But there being no track limits, that was definitely a possibility. But it really sucked to see them go down like that. And then we'll move on. We'll get into yes. Chip Ganassi finished fifth. It was absolutely gutting to watch Chip take his headset off and kind of put it down and just walk away. And it was just brutal. And like their Twitter and their Instagram was literally like silent after that. I think Chip posted something the day after and was like,
it was very sad. I mean, you prepare for so long, you have such a promising race, and to lose it in the last hour or so, it's heartbreaking.
Sure.
For sure.
So then we'll get into the two NASCAR drivers. We'll start off with Chase Elliott. If you didn't see Chase Elliott, he went from a babyface Chase Elliott to I won a championship and now I'm fucking Yosemite Sam pulling out the six shooters. That stash was on point. It was a very nice stash, but there was a big dynamic with him. So Chase Elliott drove for the 31 Whelen Engineering Cadillac. They started on pole, Felipe Nasser. They had a fabulous car. I think it was really fast. They just ran into some crazy issues. I know Chase Elliott, he said he went over a curb, damaged the floor, which also damaged, I think, the transmission.
Yes, the transmission is what put them in the garage, which put them laps down.
So just brutal there. And what was really interesting, and then we'll go over, I don't know where they finished. They weren't.
I do not know either.
So I'm not sure where the 31 finished, but then we'll also, we'll contrast the 31 with the 48 and Jimmy Johnson. So Jimmy Johnson, Rockefeller, and Kobayashi were in one car. They did really well, but you can really pit Chase Elliott and Jimmy Johnson's speed. They were fairly close in how fast they were. But the big difference...
Oh, and Simon Pagenaud.
Simon Pagenaud was in that car. Yes. But what was really interesting to me was, I think the 48 finished on the podium.
Yes, it was number 2, second place.
So second place. But the big difference that I saw was when Chase Elliott got out of the car, they stuck a mic in his face and they were like, hey, how did it go? And he was literally...
They finished 6th. I just found it. They finished 6th place.
Who finished?
31.
Okay, so they finished last in their category pretty much.
Let me check. No, the number 5 finished last.
Right, the Mustang sampling didn't make it.
Yes, and then the Chip Ganassi car was 5th. The 4th place car was the number 60 Meyer Shank Racing car. And third
Mazda.
was the 55 Mazda.
Okay, so it was crazy to watch them stick a microphone into Chase Elliott's face, and he's a young man. He just came off a win, championship, NASCAR championship, and it was really interesting to see him. He just seemed so deflated. It was fairly early in the race, but he was like, "Man, I'm really upset with my stint. I was horribly slow. I damaged the car. It's all my fault. I'm sorry to the guys." And you contrast that with somebody like Jimmy Johnson, who obviously is retired from NASCAR now. He's an older man. He's won 7 championships. And what was really interesting with him was he was pretty much on the same pace. He wasn't very much faster than Chase Elliott, but he was like, I'm having a great time. We're doing it's fabulous.
So, here's how I look at it. Chase Elliott joined a team, a very, very successful IMSA team. They run every season. They're full season guys. These are guys that are going to run another full season. They're preparing to win a championship. And Jimmy Johnson has his own team. That's his own car. He put together the team.
That makes sense.
They're not planning on putting a whole championship together this season. But Whelen Engineering, Daytona's big for them. That's a lot of points. Qualifying has points this year too, so it was good that they were on the pole. But, they run full season. So for him to feel like he just ruin their season is big, but when it comes to Johnson, I mean, they're just in it for the fun of it. he's in it just to win the race and see if he can do it. While Whelen Engineering, they're running a full season. They have a lot more pressure on them to win this race. And if he feels like he was the one that put them in a bad spot, I mean, that's hard for him.
For sure. I can definitely understand that. That now that you say it like that, I never really thought about it like that. So that definitely puts a different dynamic and a different spin on how much pressure was actually on Chase Elliott.
Yes.
So we're going to get into Keating. I don't know his first name.
Ben Keating.
Ben Keating. Iron Man Ben Keating.
Yes.
Ben Keating, brass balls of steel.
Mm-hmm.
He raced in 2 different cars in 2 different classes in this race. And from what I understand, this isn't the first time he does it. Every Daytona, and he does it at Le Mans.
This is not his first rodeo. He does this a lot. He mostly does it at Daytona, but he has done it in Le Mans. And, I mean, just the way
caffeine pills have to be strong with that man.
Yes, 5-hour energies. I wouldn't be surprised if he's, doing some other stuff that we're not talking about.
Bumping a line and getting out there. He's got to be peeing in his suit.
You have to think about his age as well. He's an older driver. I don't know exactly his age, but I believe he's over 50 years old. And for him to be double stinting in 2 different cars, he went from a GT Daytona, because he raced in the Aston Martin, the Wins Racing Aston Martin TF Sport. He went from that car to an LMP2 car. So not only is he double stinting during a 24-hour event, he's also going from a GT3 spec car to an full-blown LMP2 car in one race. To get used to one car and then go to another car, it is extremely difficult.
Yeah, spot your braking points, understanding turn-ins.
So different. I mean, you're racing against different people. I mean, it is so hard to do that. And for him to just do this year after year, I wouldn't be surprised if he retires after this year. I mean, he's a monster when it comes to this stuff. And it's not his first time doing that.
Unreal. And then you got, what I was also thinking was, I mean, I'm in my 30s and I was tired, but these guys are racing stints.
Yes.
1 stints up to possible, sometimes quadruple stints.
Yes. 3 hours is usually a stint.
And then they get out of the car and they're like, here, you got to go do this interview. Go sit in that booth. Yeah. Bro, kiss my ass. I want to go take a nap before I have to get back. And most of them don't even sleep because they're so hyped up and they have so much adrenaline running through them that they couldn't fall asleep if they wanted to. It's amazing to think that these guys are staying awake 24 hours and racing at 200 miles an hour.
Yes, it's insane. I mean, the amount of coffee that they have to intake is probably unhealthy on so many levels. But I mean, yeah, it's interesting to see how, some of these drivers get out of these cars and they have to act professional even though they're sitting in hours of sweat, possible pee.
Yeah.
I mean, and they're drained. They want to go rest. They want to eat. They just want to get out of their fire suit for a little bit. And interviewers are coming up to them like, how was this stint? And some of these guys are fighting huge battles. Some of them just came off of, heartbreak. And they're like, oh, tell us about everything. And I know I would just want to be like, get out of my face. I'm going to my trailer and just doing something else.
Exactly.
I mean, it's insane. It's crazy.
Yeah, we talked about the yellow flags. Yes, there were a lot more than last year. However, not too many scary moments, which was good.
No, not at all. It was very, like, the yellow flags were very... It was for debris, a lot of them. Some of them were just spun out tracks.
One car incidents.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess the really only scary one would be the Porsche. That was a very scary moment.
I think the scariest moment of the race wasn't even a yellow flag. It was Bill Auberlen in the pits. I mean, the car pulls away. I think what happened was, Colton Herta was actually driving. He had just taken over for Bill Auberlen. Bill Auberlen was standing on the other side of the pit wall watching the rest of the pit. Most drivers will do that. They'll kind of stay out of the way, but they'll watch how the pit goes. And what happened was, Colton Herta, I don't know if he put it in gear and just kind of rolled, but what happened was he took off, and the guy in the front, you could see clearly he got his hand out, but I guess, you're in there, you're ready to go. You hear maybe go on the headset, but you don't look forward to see what's going on. He took off and it snapped the fuel hose so bad that it sprayed fuel over pretty much their entire pit crew. And Bill Auberlin got a face full of fuel, and you could see right after that he ran away.
Yeah, I didn't see it at the race because, of course, I was in the infield, not really watching the pits, but I heard about that, and that's scary. I mean, yeah, it sucks to get sprayed by gasoline, but what if there's a spark?
Right.
Your entire team is on fire at that point.
Sometimes you don't even need a spark. It's just the heat coming off the rotors or the...
Exactly. The rotors are very hot, and if any of that fuel gets near those rotors, it engulfs.
Yeah.
And it's very scary. I'm sure he cleaned everything after that very well.
I also heard that, because they were talking like, oh, it's going to be all over his suit. What are they going to do? And they said that each driver usually has 3 Nomex suits that they carry.
They usually have a bunch of suits just in case something happens, because, of course, if you do have to go to the bathroom during a race, you can't just pull into the pits and be like, I got to go. You got to do it in your race suit. And I'm sure a lot of those guys do not want to be sitting in their own
urine
pits.
For that much. Yeah
for triple stints. I mean,
that's gotta suck.
It's uncomfortable. So a lot of these guys do carry a lot of different race suits for just in case, and of course the sweat too. I mean, these guys over a stint could be losing 30 pounds of sweat. Like Lewis Hamilton, that one race he was talking 30 pounds in one race. I mean, and these guys are going longer than Lewis Hamilton was going, and he lost that much in that time. So I imagine it's very uncomfortable to have the same race suit for 24 hours.
Yeah, some of these drivers, I think Van der Zandt was over 9 or 10 hours in total. I think he raced the entire thing. So that's unreal. And then some of the other stories, especially in the DPI class, and we're going to get to the GTD and GTLM classes in a minute, but, DPI, obviously, they were on screen the most, a lot of the biggest stories. The 55 Mazda, just... brutal. Couldn't get the car going before the race. They had gear issues. They couldn't get it out of 3rd or 4th, I think, at one point in the race. Then they had radio issues, so they couldn't figure out when to pit. Then they had telemetry issues on top of that, so they couldn't figure out what was going on with the car. And at 19 hours left, it just seemed like, once they got through the 19-hour mark, so what, they had 4 or 5 hours left? That all seemed to fall away, and their race just came around.
The Mazdas, so in 2019 was their first win. They were around since 2017, which was the first year of DPI. After those 2 wins, they came alive. I mean, this team went from a winless, hopeful team to a possible championship winner. And they had a very strong car this year. They looked to possibly win the race.
Right.
As long as they had the same reliable car, because the car, what would happen, I think 2 years in a row, because I remember in 2019 when I was there, the car engulfed in flames. Both cars engulfed in flames at some point.
Jesus.
And it was just the reliability of these Mazdas was not there.
Right.
And it was until the end of 2019 when they won those 2 races, the Mazdas had 0 issues. They were very reliable, very quick. I mean, they set the fastest lap ever at Daytona. They still have the lap record at Daytona. And they looked to have a very strong car, and as long as there was no incidents, and of course there were, but as long as there was no incidents, they could have won that race easily.
They shrunk down from a 2-car team to a 1 team so they could focus on
LMDH.
Yeah.
They are hoping to use the money that they would have spent on a DPI team and put it towards an LMDH team in the future.
So even though all those issues, I'm still 3rd place.
Yeah.
3rd in class.
That's how 24-hour races work.
Unreal.
Some cars will come back down from 3-4 laps. I mean, last year, it was 2019 at Sebring. Porsche was 2 laps down at the beginning of the race. And 2 laps down, I mean, that's insane. They won the race.
Unreal.
From 2 laps down. And in 12 hours. I mean, it's insane to see how sometimes pit strategies and just running without problems after, a major issue can put you in such a good position. 3rd place for a car that had so many issues is insane.
Right.
That's how it works, though.
So, and then the other thing that I found that was really crazy about this race specifically was they had to really calm down the drivers. It seemed like everyone was going for it. I text messaged you in the middle of the race, and I was like, dude, like we have, Ken Bear. If you ever sit down and listen with us with Ken Bear, he talks all the time about how you race at 95% until about the last 2 hours, and then you got to really, take it to the limit. And a lot of the reason why it's not easier to drive endurance racing, but it's a little more relaxed is because you're not on the limit the whole time. That our whole mentality went right out the window because these guys were pushing.
I noticed it more with the Corvettes. They seemed like they were out for blood. They were neck and neck the entire time. I mean, they were lapping the BMWs without any issues. I mean, these cars, every time I watched them come by, it looked like they were hunting down specific cars just to hunt them. And it was so cool to watch how some of these teams were just on it the entire time. No holding back. They just wanted that win so bad that they were, I mean, this was only 13, 14 hours into the race, and I was watching the Corvettes. Usually you don't see this. Usually they're, some cars are 50 seconds ahead. These guys were, 5 seconds within each other. The entire class was 5 seconds between the entire field. They were going as fast as they could, and it was insane. I mean,
it also
24 hours.
It also speaks to the technology in the cars because normally you would have to really, if you watch the Ford versus Ferrari, you listen to Christian Bale play Ken Miles, and he really talks about how you got to listen to the car and feel what it's giving you, and that used to be a thing, and not so long ago it was still a thing, and it just seems like now they can go balls to the wall, and the car is going to be there.
They are so reliable now. The technology is so advanced now that a lot of these cars can go 100% for 24 hours. And as long as the drivers are on it and they know what they're doing, I mean, you could go 100% for 24 hours, and it's crazy.
Unreal. So we're going to kind of move through a couple of different things. Wayne Taylor Racing, they did really well. Congratulations. Hats off to them. I believe this is their second or third?
Fourth year, I believe.
Fourth year win, but they did two. Is it 2 in a row now or 3 in a row?
I think it's 3 in a row.
I think it's 3 in a row now.
They won in 2019, 20, and 21.
Unreal. So that's a hell of a feat. Hats off to them. They raced a hell of a race. Yes. I think they were sandbagging in the beginning. if you want my God,
interesting strategy.
Well, we just also talked about how everybody else was going balls to the wall. So maybe they weren't sandbagging. Maybe they're actually racing the 95% race.
Wayne Taylor Racing has had so much experience at Daytona, and they're so good at winning at Daytona that they have their own strategy. A lot of times you won't see the number 10 when they were Cadillac even. They don't normally have the pace. It was 2019. Mazda seemed to kill everybody. I mean, they had the fastest cars on track. Acura looked very competitive in 2019. And the Cadillac kind of just sat behind until the last 5 hours of the race. The Cadillacs were unstoppable. I mean, they pull it out at the perfect time. They pull out the strategy. And that's how they won. They were not in any position to win this race. I think that either the 48 or the 01 should have won.
Sure.
And it was... They came out at the right time, and the pits were perfect. Their pit strategies were perfect.
Unreal.
And that's how they were in the right spot at the right time. Now, of course, Van der Zander's cut down tire helped them
for sure.
a lot because it pulled off the pressure from their car. But, I mean, that was an insane strategy.
It was a different car, though. You saw that car in the beginning of the race, and you were like, man, this car is not going to go what the hell is going on with them? And then all of a sudden, it was like...
At the Roar, they were not on pace. They were very low. Even the Meyer Shank car, they were very close. The Meyer Shank and the.
I had a feeling that Meyer Shank wasn't going to be there though. Coming out of the lower class, the GTD.
Yeah, they had to.
They're going to be growing pains.
Yes, they need to go through feeling what a DPI feels like from a GT3 car. But Wayne Taylor Racing and Meyer Shank Racing did not have the pace. It was all Cadillac. Mazda kind of got up there sometimes in some of the night sessions, but it was all Cadillac. And then, the race comes and Wayne Taylor's like, we got a different strategy than everybody else, and that's how they won.
Unreal. So, I mean, again, hats off to them. They did great. The 48, they did fabulous. The Mazda was great. I'm kind of a little bit gutted for the Mustang sampling car for what happened to them in the middle of the night. They were running up front almost the entire race. I feel like I went to sleep. I woke up to feed my kid at like 2 a.m, and they weren't even in the fucking race anymore. I was like, what the hell?
That's what happens. That, you wake up and you're like, wow, the car's gone. That happened last year with the Corvette. They looked like they were going to retire the car. It was a bell housing crack. They went out at like 10 o'clock at night. They didn't come back till 5 a.m.
Unreal.
It's crazy.
So I'm kind of gutted for that team because the Mustang sampling was really strong, and I really enjoyed watching that car lap, and they just weren't there at the end. Congratulations to Corvette, the 1-2 win. They had, especially their winning car, the number 3, unreal what had happened to them. And I don't think anybody knew about this during the race.
I had no idea until after the race. I noticed in some of because I watched the podium from the grandstands, I noticed that there were only 2 Corvette guys, and I was like, that's kind of odd. Where's the third? And then I read that Antonio Garcia came down with COVID, or got tested and came back positive for COVID after 17 hours in the race, which meant that Taylor and Katzberg had to pull out, I think it's 7 hours and by themselves.
Change,
two full stints. It's, and for them to win the race
at the end of the race, like,
exactly. That is some
Iron Man
stuff.
Right. So they pulled it out. Yeah. You're 17 hours with 3 drivers, and then all of a sudden you're down to 2 drivers. I mean, that's some old school stuff. Back in the day, 1 driver, 2 drivers to race the whole entire 24 hours was the thing.
It's one thing to have your driver get tested and have positive before the race so that you have another driver. This was unreal. This is during the race. This is, during the middle of the race, you're leading the entire time. I don't think Corvette ever lost the lead. They were in the lead the entire time. And then all of a sudden you have to forfeit one of your drivers because they just got tested positive for COVID.
Brutal.
It was so weird to see that happen and then still win. That's an achievement right there.
For sure. Let's get into the GTD winners, or the GTD class in general, and then we're going to kind of wrap this up and get out of here. I know we've guys held your attention for about an hour and a half, and this was a hell of a time. I can't wait to have you back. But the GTD class, if you didn't follow it, was fantastic. Everybody coming into this was thinking Lexus. Vassar Sullivan, don't call him AIM anymore, but but Vassar Sullivan, they stacked the deck. They went out there and they got a couple of drivers. They got a couple of older drivers. They got a couple of younger drivers, fast guys. Oliver Gavin. They got a few. I remember, I can't remember now, but if you were following us on Instagram, I was posting that they were signing people left and right. Yes. I thought they were going to walk away with this thing.
Very good driver lineup for GT Daytona. And unfortunately, it was not their race again. A lot of problems.
And then who, a lot of no names, I wouldn't say no names, but unknown, we'll call them unknown winners or first time podium standers.
So, these guys aren't new to IMSA. They raced in, I believe, the Pilot Challenge, and this is Windward Racing. They raced the 57 GT Daytona Mercedes, and then the other team is not new to IMSA at all. Actually, they've only taken a few years off, and that is Sun Energy Racing, which got second in their 75 AMG GT3. And then the third place car was the defending race winners, which was the number 1 Paul Miller car with Brian Sellers, Madison Snow, Corey Lewis, and Andre.
That's actually, if you go on our website, that's the, I believe if I remember correctly, that's the car that's on the background that I took a photo of. It's got the number 48. They actually relinquished the number 48 so Jimmy Johnson's team could pick it up just for this race, and they took over the number 1. And they raced a hell of a race because they were not up at the front for majority of the race.
They were very far behind.
Yeah.
They had to really pull out a good strategy to get where they were. And, they did a hell of a job.
For sure.
For them to come, I believe they were a couple laps down at some point.
But if you would think,
back and get third.
you would think that if Lexus isn't going to win, you would assume that a Lamborghini's probably going to do it.
Yes,
and it was two Mercedes out of nowhere.
And you know what? A part of it was the two, not Magnus, the two Grasser racing cars.
Yeah.
They retired.
Oh yeah, the two Lambos, the green ones.
They retired pretty much together.
Unreal. It was like boom,
These
boom.
guys are veterans at Daytona, and they retired both of their cars. I remember seeing the cars in the garages early in the morning. One of the cars, the entire front bumper was just NASCAR taped. It looked like, and the other car was just in pieces. It's insane. These guys are multiple time winners of the Rolex 24, and they both were out of the race within. I think it was halfway through. They both were retired.
Was it last year that they had that car catch on fire?
Yes, it was the Gear racing car,
right,
run by Grasser GRT.
So they got an airflow problem that they got to get the hand on.
Yeah, that was scary. I don't know if you've seen the video of, I believe it was Christina Nielsen.
Yeah, she jumps out of the car and she pulls the fire extinguisher.
Yeah, that was like crazy. But yeah, they've had some bad luck, but they are they've had a lot of race wins.
Oh, of course, yeah.
And for them to pretty much just retire halfway through the race, that was very surprising.
Right. So GTD, again, fabulous racing, door to door. They were, I mean, the battle between the two Mercedes and the Lamborghini at the end of the race, jaw dropping. I mean,
yes,
shut down, turn. They were blocking each other. They were avoiding faster cars, but still battling each other. It was fabulous to watch. So this 24-hour was one of my favorites. I believe that there were just enough yellow flags to bunch up the field and keep everything competitive. But there weren't too many yellow flags where you were like, all right, come on, this is getting ridiculous now.
Yes.
Not a lot of danger, which is good. You don't like to see that. But there was some crashes. Some cars had some issues. They had to bring cars behind the wall. Some pit lane repairs were pretty interesting. Great driver lineups. This 24-hour of Daytona, the 24-hour Rolex was fabulous way to kick off this season. I can't wait to see where this goes. I'm just even more excited for what comes down the pipe. I'm stoked for Le Mans. I'm stoked for March 20th, seeing you at Sebring. And
that will be fun.
We're going to have to run this back. We're going to have to do another episode after Sebring and even some of these shorter endurance races. Let's get back together and do it again. I had a really good time. Hopefully Brett can join us next time.
Yeah, that'll be cool.
Next up here is going to be the Daytona 500. So we'll see if Denny Hamlin can three-peat, and hopefully that'll set him on his path to his possible first championship. But we will come back and do an episode for that. We do have we just started reaching out to people to try to get some interviews going again. I got a brand new console, which I'm really excited about. That I'm doing this over a FaceTime. So learning the kinks, but going to be doing some over-the-phone interviews out of state, hopefully maybe worldwide one day, and get some wide range of viewers and listeners and guests and things like that for you guys to hear. So it's just going to get more interesting as this year of 2021 goes on. We really thank you for being here for the last hour and a half. I want to thank you, Tyler, for you were going to join us anyway, but you almost filled in like a co-host. And to be honest with you, you did a great job. And
thank you.
I thank you for being on here. I know you watch other racing. I would hope that you watch more Formula One IndyCar this year, and maybe we can get you on for some of those, because this was a fabulous episode. I really enjoyed it. I had a blast. I really wish Brett was here. It's killing me that he's not, but I understand, got to do what you got to do. Family life comes first. We really appreciate you joining us. Patreon is back up on the website. We changed around the tiers. We changed around the rewards. We changed around the goals to try to make it a little more reasonable, a little more reliable. And we do have some lofty goals still on there, but, we do have some gifts for you, stickers, shirts, things like that when you sign up and you're a member of the Patreon. Help us out. Any little bit helps. You can make donations on there as well. It just allows us to, get more equipment, reach out farther to get new guests on, and just keep bringing this show back to you. Again, the International Motorsports Show without a British accent. We really appreciate you guys, and we'll see you guys soon. Peace.